Hey there everyone, one of the most frequently asked topics are my add-ons, so I decided to make a video about that. I also wanted to thank everyone who supported my YouTube channel so far, as it reached 500 subscribers recently. Thank you. So, in this guide I will go over the combat-related add-ons I use for PvE healing, where to get them, roughly how I've set them up, and so on. I will also cover a few add-ons I don't use, but I know a lot of other healers do, and discuss a few more general things regarding add-ons. So to get that straight right away, you can heal at a very high level in ESO without any add-ons. I mean, all good console healers do so after all. But add-ons can nevertheless greatly improve your performance as well as your enjoyment. Some add-ons are also almost essential if you want to raid at a high level on PC, as the tactics and calls used by good groups are often built around those add-ons. For managing my add-ons, I use Minion, a third-party program that simplifies installing, updating and deleting add-ons. Minion features basically every add-on that is publicly available, and so every add-on I will show you in this video. Having such a tool is particularly handy as the add-ons in ESO require updates quite frequently, as well as the additional libraries that can also be downloaded with Minion. To further manage your add-ons, you can use Circonian's add-on Selector, an add-on that allows you to create profiles of add-on configurations. So you can very easily switch between PvE and PvP or healer and DPS for example, without going through all your add-ons and libraries manually. So let's actually get into my configuration for PvE healing now. The core add-on for my UI is Bandits user interface. Bandits is in my experience the most bug-free, visually pleasing and performance-friendly general UI add-on. I mainly use it for the group frame, which I configured to feature color-coded roles, visualized shields and health and shield numbers, since I consider all that pretty important information for a healer. And the second important function for me are the skill timers for front and back bar. But I also use Bandits for a lot of smaller things like the crosshair, resource bars, auto-confirm and so on. The other big part of my UI is the buff and debuff trackers, for which I use Srendarr. This is probably the most complex buff tracker out there, and that's also what makes it really good. You can track and customize basically anything you can imagine, so once you've taken the time to properly set it up, you can track precisely the information you're looking for without cluttering your screen with hundreds of buffs and debuffs you don't need to see. A function that I don't use in Srendarr and that I also don't have other add-ons for that might surprise you is tracking buffs and debuffs on the group or on individual players. I know a lot of healers do at least use a Purge Tracker and often also track stuff like Combat Prayer on every individual player, but I don't. And the reason simply is that this information holds very little value but can at the same time be really distracting in my opinion. There's only a handful of fights in the entire game where you need to play with Purge at all, and all of them either have such obvious effects that I don't need a tracker to see them, Yandir the Butcher for example, or a purgeable effect that is so constant that I simply play Purge in my normal rotation, like Hunter-Killer Fabricants. As for tracking buffs on individual players, uptimes in ESO are never perfect, mainly because smart targeting is a steaming pile of garbage. So, in my opinion, what makes a good healer is not the uptime of a specific buff on a specific player, but the combined value of the provided support to the entire group. And for that, getting a generally good coverage with each effect is better than overly focusing on one and thereby losing another. And for that, having one tracker for the general duration is, at least for me, better than having an individual tracker on every player. A long story short, more add-ons don't make you a better player. In fact, information overload can quickly achieve the exact opposite. And because that is entirely subjective, you need to find out what works for you and what doesn't. Apart from Srendarr, I also use a few trackers for specific effects. What you've seen me use in my videos so far for tracking Olyrim and Roaring Opportunist were the appropriately named add-ons, Olyrim and Roaring Opportunist. But I recently replaced those with OdyHybridHeal, an add-on that features those trackers and quite a few more at least in my opinion, cleaner look. Another really great add-on is Aim Synergy Tracker, which can track the cooldown for synergies on individual players. I'm currently barely using this add-on as there isn't much point in timing synergies on individual players in the content I currently play, But where this add-on really shines is stuff like Asylum Sanctorium front kiting, for example, where it allows you to precisely time your synergies on the tank, so you can have perfect uptimes without constantly spamming those synergies. For damage and ulti share, I use Hodor Reflexes. I mean, if you use an add-on like that, and which one you use, of course, depends on your group. But I think basically everyone is using Hodor Reflexes these days. So what it does is allow you to share your DPS and see the DPS of other players that also share it. And similarly, it allows you to share how much ultimate you have towards your Horn or Colossus to coordinate those ultimates. The add-on can also show you the remaining duration on those ultimates, how many players are in range, and can even call when to activate your ultimate with settings for role priority and so on. For encounter analysis, I use Combat Metrics. This add-on records fights and gives you a very detailed analysis afterwards. This is an amazing tool to improve your performance as a healer, as you can take your time afterwards to look at your uptimes, your healing, the incoming damage, your rotation, your resources, and so on, to figure out exactly where you can improve. Next, I will go over my add-ons for encounter-specific mechanics and timers. As my general one for almost all content, I use Code's Combat Alerts. This add-on tracks basically every PvE mechanic out there and mostly uses center screen messages, often also with a visualized timer, but also utilizes other display methods for specific mechanics. I understand that a lot of players don't really like this type of add-on, and to be honest with you, I would also prefer to play without it, but mechanic indicators in ESO, if there are any to begin with, are just way too inconsistent and buggy for that in my opinion. Playing without that additional information is of course possible, but it requires entirely different tactics that specifically make up for those issues. And originally having moved to ESO from World of Warcraft and Guild Wars 2, I'm just not willing to deal with that. Further, on PC, in contrast to console, the meta has formed around the tactics those add-ons enable, and so to play on a competitive level, you're basically required to utilize such add-ons. But back to Code's Combat Alerts, I think it does a really good job of displaying all the necessary information to play mechanics efficiently. My only issue with it is that it displays a bit too much information for my liking and has barely any configuration options. So for specific content, I use other add-ons in addition or to replace Code's Combat Alerts. For Asylum Sanctorium, I use Asylum Sanctorium Status Panel. This simply shows timers for all big mechanics. I think AS is like the worst offender for not visualizing mechanics properly. There's a massive overload of irrelevant AoE indicators, while all the more important mechanics are just timer based with basically no indicators at all. Like the cast animations of the side bosses are literally half a second long. For Sunspire, I use HowToSunspire, which is a Sunspire specific alternative to Cold Combat Alerts that is, in my opinion, a bit better for this specific raid. And for Blackrose Prison, I use Blackrose Prison Helper, which tracks the stage and wave as well as the spawns of more important enemies. This isn't really that important and I usually turn it off once I remember everything again, but it really comes in handy for planning out strategies and dialing in timing and positioning. As a direct alternative to Code's Combat Alerts, there's also RaidNotifier, which I actually like more in a lot of aspects, particularly the high level of customization. However, RaidNotifier doesn't get updated anymore, so it does not feature kind sages at all and is also outdated for some other content. But it can still be a great alternative for older content to have an add-on that doesn't flood your screen with every single mechanic. Another really important thing for raiding are skill and gear presets, for which I use Dressing Room. It lets you save gear and bar setups and bind them to hotkeys, so you press one key to change everything to what you need for the next fight instead of changing everything manually. I think this is really a must-have for everyone, but especially healers tend to have a ton of different setups. There's also alpha gear that does the same thing. I think Dressing Room is a lot better though, but that is really subjective. I have also heard from quite a few people that either Dressing Room or alpha gear doesn't properly work for them, so it's nice to know that there's an alternative, I guess. And the last add-on I use that I want to feature in this video is Auto Recharge and Repair. As the name suggests, this add-on automatizes weapon recharge and gear repair. The way it works is that you set a threshold for charge and durability and choose what source the add-on uses to recharge or repair. Not overly important, but I still wanted to mention it since I find it really handy and it explains why I never recharge or repair anything in my videos. Okay, now we'll talk about a few more add-ons that can be interesting for PvE healing that I personally don't use. I already mentioned Purge Tracker, and while it is not relevant for me personally, it can still be a very handy add-on, I think, especially for players that are less familiar with the Purge mechanics or have trouble seeing those effects for some reason. Another really interesting visualization add-on is OdySupportIcons. With this add-on, you can assign symbols to players in your group to find them easier. I generally have no issue with remembering positioning or finding players based on their name or character model, but if you do, this add-on can really help a lot, I think. And the last add-on for this video is Action Duration Reminder. If you just want the timers on your skill bar and not have a big UI add-on like Bandits, Action Duration Reminder is what you're looking for. So that is it. All my PvE healing add-ons and a bit more. Of course, there are many more alternative add-ons. I have only shown you what I personally think are the best ones. Otherwise, we would be sitting here all day. Nevertheless, a thank you goes out to all add-on creators out there. You're really doing an amazing work for the ESO community. Of course, all add-ons I've shown you are also linked in the video description. I hope you enjoyed this video and also learned something. Thank you for watching.